Who pooped in the peanut barrel?
Who pooped in the peanut barrel?
Elf Bowling the Movie, The Great North Pole Elf Strike, was a feature film produced in 2007. What's wrong with that? The fact that that sentence even started. Elf Bowling was a popular video game originally created by Dan Ferguson and Mike Belinsky, founders of the company Envision Design. First published in 1998 as a free downloadable game, it rose to virality after hundreds of thousands of people believed it was a computer virus, due to it being the target of a global chainmail thread that claimed the game would self-destruct your computer on Christmas Day. And when I said this game about bowling elves was popular, I wasn't joking. After the original game's release in 1998, Envision was acquired by Vectrix Business Solutions in 1999, a triumph for the developer. The logistics of the game and its sequels shifted many times throughout the years, so let's talk more about the actual games rather than the businessy stuff. In Elf Bowling, Santa Claus gets revenge on his despicable elves by using them as bowling pins. During the game, the elves and surrounding creatures do their best to distract the player. For example, you'll notice reindeers surrounding the lane, frogs wearing Santa hats, and white rabbits hopping across the strip. The elves also sing Elf Elf Baby at regular occurrences. The very simple PC game was a huge hit, however its reputation was threatened in late 1999 after a series of sham chainmail threads that claimed that Elf Bowling, as well as another game by the same developers, Frogapult, carried a delayed Trojan horse virus that would wipe out your hard drive on Christmas Day. Unfortunately, the Elf Bowling virus sham came to life as millions of people were using online mail for the first time and were unaware of the consequences of opening executable files. Since the game was an exe file, and it was so easy to attach to emails, people could download it from the receiving end in just a click. So when people found out that one of their favourite games may have been infected by this fatal bug, people freaked out and demanded an explanation from the founding fathers of Elf Bowling. Envision spent weeks fighting back from the claims, which were only made worse by a twisted article by the Inquirer, which the company reportedly called irresponsible and inaccurate, by outlining that the company used spyware techniques in their games without telling users. As Ernie Smith from Tedium put it, somewhere along the line throughout this whole mess, the legitimate privacy concerns highlighted by the media got turned into something approaching a full-blown hoax. Email, the same medium that made Elf Bowling a hit, gave it an unfounded reputation as a piece of malware. However, despite the hiccups along the way, Elf Bowling remained a whopping success for Envision. The Scripps Newswire reported that the game was downloaded over 900 times per second after its release in November '98, which prompted many sequels, all contributing to the ever-expanding Elf Bowling lore. Explaining in a TV interview in 2001, the two creators explained the future of their company and their games. Elf Bowling 2 doesn't even involve bowling. Instead, you play as Santa, competing against his brother Dingle Kringle in a game of shuffleboard. The stakes are high. The winner gets the title of Father Christmas, and the defeated loses their job. In Elf Bowling 3,
The elves go to hell.
the next installment, Super Elf Bowling, aka Elf Bowling 4, was in 3D, a huge visual upgrade compared to its predecessors. It features more complicated ball control and throwing options, a wider variety of backgrounds, and even more wacky elf antics and jokes the series was known for. But Santa didn't stop there. Elf Bowling 5, known as Elf Bowling Bocce Style, turned the well-known game of elf bowling on its head, using the elves as bocce balls. The descent into madness continues with Elf Bowling 6, Air Biscuits, a game so relevant it has a whole 5 Google search results. The game involved bowling elves over mounds of snow, sending the elves flying into the air. The elves could remain in the air by using, get this, fart power. I wish I was joking. The elves go on an exotic Hawaiian vacation in the final installment of the Elf Bowling series, but not before Elf Bowling 7, The Last Insult. Returning to its original bowling format, The Last Insult adds a story mode, along with power-ups that can be utilized by Santa to overcome the elves' dastardly obstacles. So that's finally the end of the elf bowling video games. Now on to the worst spend of $6.5 million the universe has ever seen. Elf Bowling the movie, The Great North Pole Elf Strike, because some people just want to see the world burn. It was released in 2007, the same year Norbit was released. Needless to say, a great year for cinema. Voicing not one, not two, but three main characters is Tom Kenny, the well-loved voice actor of SpongeBob SquarePants, the Ice King from Adventure Time, and even Spyro the Dragon. This was Kenny's big break when it came to cinema. Joining Kenny was Joe Alaskey, known for playing many Warner Brothers characters, such as Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, the list goes on. Plus, the director of the film, Dave Kim, also had a pretty good portfolio, working on the visual effects for Fargo, Once Upon a Time, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Iron Man 3. EBTGNPES had high expectations from critics. Let's just say those expectations weren't met, so let's go through the movie and see where they went wrong. I spent 82 minutes of my precious life watching Elf Bowling the movie, so you don't have to. Captain Santa Maria, Clausewitz Kringle, and Dingle Kringle are both pirates who steal toys from children. After falling overboard the ship fighting each other, they freeze into icebergs and float away onto the snowy shores of the North Pole. An elf by the name of Lex saves them, takes them to their toy factory, and Santa bowls a bunch of elves over for no reason. And that's the story of how Santa became Father Christmas. 1400 years later, his brother Dingle gets jealous of Santa and tricks him into believing that one of his elves has gone missing. So, Santa leaves to go find the elf. Dingle blows up the toy factory and then somehow convinces all the workers to move to Fiji? And they do. And Santa doesn't know about it. And all the elves think Santa betrayed them. So then Dingle takes all the elves into a sweatshop, hypnotizes the elves to make toys, and then sings a song promoting slavery.
For there's nothing in this world quite as profitable as involuntary servitude. Oh, yes.
Santa finds them in Fiji, takes the elves back, saves Christmas, the end. The paper-thin plot isn't even the worst part about the movie though. Far from it. Really sloppy and inconsistent animation, poor audio quality.
Oh, man! How come my underwear's on backwards?
Jokes that just don't work well.
Section 13, subsection 8, paragraph 16b, and I quote, condition proceeding to all obligations.
Massive plot holes and a complete disconnect from the original game series haunt this film and make it a really, really boring watching experience. The biggest problem I had with this movie is how cliche and predictable everything was, and thus how boring it got. The plot follows the same "we have to save Christmas" theme that so many other movies have taken before. It's not original in the slightest. And even with the unique twist of making Santa a pirate at the beginning, the end result was still bland and draining to watch. Another thing I despised about this movie was how incredibly, insanely stupid these elves were. It was shocking how gullible and easily influenced these freaks were. When the two brothers are playing bowling at the start, none of the elves watching the game noticed the two extremely obvious outliers standing next to the bowling pins, which are literally the enemy's penguins.
Wow, if the Dingmeister can pull that off, I can't wait to see what Santa can do.
Dingle literally explained his entire evil plot involving stealing all of the elves' toys right in front of a few of them, and they weren't concerned nor took notice of it.
If I had me that mystic ball, I could steal every toy from here to Timbuktu.
Well, what you do?
Elf Bowling the movie contains plot holes deeper than the Mariana Trench. Lex has a magic orb that he always carries around with him, which was used at the very beginning when he created Santa a sleigh out of thin air. The orb works perfectly fine in this scene, but in other crucial scenes where the entire town is crumbling and being destroyed, Lex doesn't use it. If it's only going to work in times when it's convenient to the plot, why even introduce a magic orb that can transform the contents of reality and make Lex carry it everywhere? And another plot hole. Santa is absolutely infuriated that Dingle hypnotizes his elves to make toys in Fiji. However, he wouldn't have had nearly enough toys for every single child in the world if it weren't for Dingle's actions.
Christmas is in 2 weeks and we're still short 6 billion toys.
But the plot hole that takes the absolute mickey out of me and many other reviewers is this. As explained earlier, at the start of the movie, the two brothers played a game of bowling for Christmas, so whoever won would become the new Father Christmas. Dingle won this match because he literally cheated in front of everyone's eyes. So you'd think that now, right after Santa has just reclaimed Christmas and all of his elves, he wouldn't be tempted to play another game. Dingle challenges Santa to another game of bowling,
and Santa accepts it.
Even though Dingle cheated and won in the first game, Santa plays again at the extremely high risk of losing Christmas again. And guess what? You wouldn't believe it, Dingle and his penguins cheat again. So, the animation. In some cases it can pass off as bearable, but for the majority of the film, everything looks like it's made out of clay, with a noticeable, strangely detailed texture on characters' faces and objects, sharing a similarity with wrinkles. Additionally, in many parts, I noticed how the mouth movements of characters were completely different to what they were verbally saying.
You're such a hunk, but charming. So you're taking over Christmas.
And the characters' movements looked so slow and forced, it did not look natural at all. On top of that, there were many instances of the same movements being copied and pasted for multiple characters, and the character models are almost the exact same at some points. Perhaps the most obvious example is this elf having the exact same skin as Santa in back-to-back scenes. I also noticed the same transitions being used multiple times, like when the set cuts away and up to the moon, and then back down again. Ultimately, it was very obvious to notice when the animators got lazy. Also, side note, the poster for this film is completely misleading. The Santa pictured in the advertisement looks nothing like its counterpart in the movie, nor does the logo look the same, and there are 6 penguins in the poster when there's only 2 in the movie. It's like this was made before the actual film was. The sound design, it's very disappointing, unsurprisingly at this point. The voice acting for Santa and Dingle is bearable, given that the actors performing them are veterans in their field.
I gotta save me poor little buddy. You won't be needing this. Wouldn't want you to lose it. Huh? Oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
But the same actors are used for more than one character. Like just one guy voices Lex,
Double bobbins?
a stone giant,
This is like a chick flick.
and a penguin.
Hey, look, boss, I can do your mom.
There is also a noticeable pause between almost every line of dialogue, which makes the film feel twice as long.
And your point is?
It's destiny. Santa, what are you doing here?
Lex, me boy, get me out of here.
For a so-called comedy film, Elf Bowling is far from one, containing gags with poor humour which just aren't funny and moments that seem out of touch, especially for a kids movie. For example, the song all about how slavery makes the world go round.
Slavery is the best game in town. It makes the world go round.
Which may have seemed okay considering its context in the film, but it's definitely a heavy and downright offensive outlier when you look at the soundtrack list. The humour in this film is largely focused on slapstick. There is an insulting amount of scenes where Dingle slaps his penguins with a fish, a visual gag that wasn't even funny the second time round.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Toilet humour is also used very frequently, with the elves constantly making armpit farts, a gag that happens way too many times. And when toilet humour isn't used, most of the jokes just don't make sense or aren't executed well enough. Like this scene where Dingle calls Lex Pinocchio, despite Dingle having a longer nose than the elf does.
Got me a question, Pinocchio.
As you could expect, this film did not go down well with the critics who were actually brave enough to watch it. Scoring a 1.8 out of 10 on IMDb and a 1.6 on Letterboxd, Elf Bowling the movie just missed out on being IMDb's lowest rated movies list due to its lack of reviews. And if you think that's bad enough for the Elf Bowling series, check out the reviews for the Nintendo DS video game, unlicensed by the way. IGN gave it a rating of unbearable at 1 out of 10. GameSpot gave it a 1.6, calling it abysmal. So how did this film even come to be, and why does it exist? I know hating on a movie just because it's called Elf Bowling sounds tempting, but let's think about this realistically. Video game movies have existed for decades. Some of them have actually been bearable. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog and Detective Pikachu. Because these movies are based on characters from very successful franchises, movie studios assume that it's going to be a great cinematic property, given the large fan bases already existing for the games, as well as the relevancy the game has in society. But making a movie based on a video game only works if the franchise is large enough to gain enough momentum and popularity before the release. The Sonic series of games has totaled hundreds of millions of sales in its lifespan, so making a movie is more understandable. But Elf Bowling? The DS game only sold 50,000 copies! Elf Bowling is one of the most shallow franchises I've ever seen, and it would be extremely difficult coming up with a backstory and a plot to warrant an 82-minute film when there is no story found in the original games and passing it off as part of the Elf Bowling series. There is practically nothing in this film that had a connection to the original games apart from the characters, which for the most part aren't even unique to the Elf Bowling series. I mean, come on, a movie? When the only thing you have to work with is a sprite animation of some elves being bowled over with a ball? There's a reason why this whole film only featured 4 scenes with actual elf bowling. The lack of familiarity between the original games and this film gives me reason to believe that the only reason they named it Elf Bowling the movie was because they were trusting that the die-hard community of elf bowlers would go and watch it. While there are many other significant problems with the movie, I think the issue that impacted its film success the most was how boring, nonsensical, and unoriginal it was. I almost fell asleep halfway through, because it was not only confusing, bland, unfunny, and an audiovisual eyesore, but because of how predictable and cliche this paper-thin plot was. To conclude, there is absolutely no way Elf Bowling the movie The Great North Pole Elf Strike should have made it to the big screen. It's a laughingstock, and not for the right reasons. And the fact that the studios who produced this and thought that making a feature film based on a 1998 computer game that nobody ever thought was groundbreaking was a good idea is beyond me. Like literally, the only reason this was made into a movie was because they thought that the Elf Bowling franchise was large enough to warrant one. Half the trailer for the film is just trying to justify why they thought it'd be a good idea.
Yes, it's Elf Bowling, the game. The outrageous mega-hit gaming sensation downloaded over 100 million times. From top portals, websites, wireless networks, and the most downloaded game ever on AOL. Direct from its unprecedented 7-year run on the World Wide Web, 850 million acclaimed performances on desktops, laptops, cell phones, and PDAs everywhere. Enjoy an incredible 300 to 400 times per second internationally, and backed by astonishing popularity statistics up the kazoo. Bowling, the movie. The first feature-length animated movie fueled by the power of this proven successful, globally recognized brand.
But I think my favourite part of the trailer is the ending. See for yourself.
And coming fall 2007, Elf Bowling 2, The Great Halloween Pumpkin Heist.
Now if there's one thing you take away from this video, I want you to remember. If you ever feel worthless, just remember that Elf Bowling on the DS had a collector's edition. Thanks for watching.